and welcome to Inner Fortitude with Isis. I'm your host, Isis Byrne, and I thank you for joining me on my next podcast. This one is kind of a continuation of my previous podcast, in that I started to talk about, how you can understand women a little bit better. And one of the biggest suggestions that I made was to become self-aware. I promised that I would have another podcast to cover that topic, and this is it. I figured that it is a really easy transition over to another, so I already segued in. If you haven't seen my previous podcast, please look it up. It's episode 8, and the topic is understanding women from an emotional intelligence perspective. So the suggestion that I had was to begin with self-awareness, and so I gave a couple of tips on how to do that, and I'm going to cover those in more detail in this particular show. So let's get started. The very first step in getting to know yourself is practicing active self-awareness. And so it isn't enough to say, oh yeah, I know myself, because I think everybody sort of feels that way. They feel like, I already know that, I already know that I'm good at this. I already know that I'm bad at that. I already know XYZ. There's a little bit more to it than that. And it isn't as simple as just saying, I know myself at the surface. What we want to do in order to truly be self-aware is kind of deep dive into the core of who you really are. And some of that can lead to places that are in the past, and some of that is going to lead to places that are in your current life. The way that you react or respond to triggers, events, people, and the effect that some emotions have on you. There's the fact that some of the emotions that you might be feeling can cause a kind of a knee-jerk reaction in your life. It can lead to poor communication if you're not really aware of who you are and why you act the way that you do. It can lead to poor communication skills because people won't understand you, because if you don't understand you, how could they, right? It leads to never addressing areas of improvement because you have so many blind spots, because you've never really taken the time to get to know yourself, that those blind spots just continue to exist and they never get addressed. So you're staying still. You're not actually growing. And that's the whole point of my show, right? To continually grow and continually develop our skills in personal development. So the very first step in developing your emotional intelligence is self-awareness, which is great. And the very first step in cultivating self-love is also knowing yourself, self-awareness. Because how can you love someone you don't know? And how can you improve on someone and care for someone that you know absolutely nothing about? So the very first thing that we're going to tackle is this self-awareness piece. So let's get started. So how? How does one develop self-awareness in the way that I'm talking about, in a way that is actually conducive to growing as a human being, to becoming a better version of yourself, okay? It's not about staying still, right? We're growing. So the very first thing that you will have to do is a few exercises in self-reflection, introspection, taking a look at yourself from a non-judgmental point of view, and to learn kind of what makes you tick and what kind of puts you off. And so I'm a big fan, as I've mentioned a few times before, I'm a big fan of journaling, okay? I just like the idea of writing things down is something that not just Isis likes to do, but therapists do it all the time. And the reason why it is so effective is because when you take your thoughts and you put them on a piece of paper and you can look at them separate from your body, not in your head, when you look at them separately, it's easier to become objective about it. It is not as difficult to make sense out of things because now you can sort of troubleshoot it on a piece of paper rather than just going through more stories in your head. So you can control, you can think before you put it on paper, and you can address those things by setting rules for yourself to say the only thing that's going to be on this piece of paper is a non-judgmental, right? Basically putting your opinion of yourself aside and the opinion of others aside to say, these are the actual facts of, what I'm trying to do. And it's really hard to do if you don't actually remove it from your head and put it down on a piece of paper. So, big fan of the piece of paper, as are therapists all around the world. And there's a really good reason for it. So just become comfortable with the idea of writing things down. I promise it's really, really good for you. So the first few exercises are going to be exercises in writing things down. So the very first thing that I would love for you to start with is to write down the perceptions that you have of yourself. Things that you believe to be true about yourself. These can be things that you're good at, right? I'm an honest person. I am really hardworking. I'm super compassionate. I help people every chance I get. I am, I'm a very good student. I learn quickly. So you can start to see things that you're good at. But don't stop there. What are the things that you can improve about yourself as well? Things that maybe you know to be true about yourself. You're not that great at this, but maybe it's something that you can improve. Things like, I am impatient, which I am. So I'm impatient, or I really don't like lazy people. I have no tolerance for lazy people. Things like I am brutally honest, right? My delivery sometimes sucks. You can, write down things that that maybe somebody has told you, hey, by the way, you do this thing. And if you're like, yeah, I do that, don't I? Those are the things that I would like you to write down. And this list can grow with time, because thinking about it in 5 minutes, more things might come to mind as you're driving in your car. So just know that it's kind of a living, breathing document that will change as you start to discover some of these things about yourself. And as people bring them up and you go, I never really thought about that, but you're right. I do tend to do that. The good and the not so good. Be okay. The point of this exercise in self-reflection is not to judge yourself. Don't get stuck in the judgmental thoughts that, this makes me a bad person, or this makes me a really good person, and I'm an exceptional human being. And you may very well be an exceptional human being. But try to come at this from a perspective of just stating the data, stating the fact that you are, a good at this, and these things maybe not so strong. And maybe these are some things that, while I don't know how to fix them just yet, I do acknowledge that I could probably do better. And it's okay. We all have them. These are called flaws, but our flaws don't have to, they don't build our identity. We can oftentimes do a lot to fix it and to make ourselves a little bit better. So be open-minded about it. Try not to judge yourself. That's not the point of this exercise. It's just to get to know who you are. So what are the things that you're good at? What are the things that you need to work on? And then write down, what are the accomplishments that you have had in your life that you are proud of? Okay, so now that we've gone through the exercise of, I am and am, this is who I am. I believe that these are the things that I am. Now write down in your series of events in life, what are the things that you're most proud of? It could be graduating from high school, getting a diploma, getting your degree in a university. It could be taking a chance and moving out of state or out of the country. It could be, making a decision, a life-changing decision, okay? What are those things that you are proud of that when you think back, you're like, yeah, I did that, okay? Write those things down. This is an exercise in not just knowing that your pros and cons, right? Like the things that you're good at, things you're not so good at. It's also seeing how far you've come. It's bringing to light the accomplishments that you've had, and we all have them. At some point or another, you did something good that when you look back, you go, I'm glad I did that. Okay? So your accomplishments. That's the other part in, self-reflection. And so the next thing is going to be a little bit unconventional, but follow my train of thought. Write down the things that you did as a child that brought you joy. Remember the little kid, okay, when you were little and you had spare time, and whether anybody was watching or not doesn't matter. What were the things that you do when you look back and go, man, when I was a kid, I used to do this thing. I loved it. What is it? Was it reading books and doing nothing but reading books? Guilty. Was it painting? Was it playing basketball in your back patio? Is it, what did you do? Draw, sketch stuff. What did you do as a child that when you think back, you're like, yeah, that was my childhood passion? What did you do to make yourself happy? This exercise may open your eyes to something that you may have neglected over the years, or maybe it was something that you nurtured throughout the years and you continue to do today. That's really important. Did you leave some of your passions behind? Did life happen and maybe that never developed into anything and you let it go because it was silly? Or was it something that, you've completely developed through the years that you're just like, no, this is really important to me and I'm not going to stop doing it. And you may have even made it a career, who knows? So what is that thing? What is that thing that is that inner child has, that jumps up and down for joy? Okay, so that's good for the journaling. I think that that's something that you can continue. It may not come to you immediately. Maybe even your family members or people that you grew up with could point out to you. They're like, man, yeah, I remember when you used to, do X, Y, Z, and we'd be like, God, let's go play outside. And you're like, no, I'd rather kind of do this. What was it? Ask around if you can't think of anything, because kids are so pure. As children, we did what we wanted to do. Joy was a big part of growing up. So what did you do as a child to escape? And then, still on piece of paper, this doesn't necessarily need to be in your journal, but in a blank piece of paper. This one is a big one. I've done it before, and it was an eye-opening exercise, actually. Create a timeline of your life. So we've started to visit who we are. We've tried to, we started to understand what those accomplishments are, how far we've come. We started to think about, man, what are the things that spark joy, right? When I was little, and you're welcome to write down some of the things that maybe you developed as an adult that sparked joy. Maybe there's a hobby or something that you discovered. Feel free to write that down too. That is still part of who you are. But now you have a timeline. So in creating this timeline of your life from birth, try to think of all of the things, all of the events that occurred in your life. Hopefully you can put it in some sort of chronological order. I know that maybe your memory is not that great. I know mine's not that great when it comes to thinking back at exact dates, but I can sort of remember how old-ish I was when these things happened. Write them down. You may find that there are correlations between the things that you're good at, the things that you may not be so good at, the things that make you happy, the things that spark passion in you, and the sequence of events. Maybe you'll find that, and it did for me, I started to realize that some of these things that I attached, right? Some of the things that I'm good at, or some of the things that I accomplished in my life, my history had a lot to do with it. And the timeline matters because sometimes you may be able to pinpoint when you stopped doing those things as a kid. Or you may realize that I didn't notice that these are some things that I never, that I stopped doing at this point in time, but it was correlated to my parents' divorce. Or it was, it seems to line up chronologically with that, that time when I signed up for the military or whatever it is, right? So write down in your timeline of life all of the major, they don't have to be big events. They could be small events that maybe had a big impact on you. Something that you remember and you're like, oh, I remember that when I got my first puppy, right? It's not a huge event, but having that first puppy maybe opened your eyes to your love for animals and you became a vet. So just write down the events that matter to you, the ones that just stick out in your head as something that seem relevant. And you'll learn a little something about yourself. So, and hopefully by now you can start to see in doing these exercises, this is going to start opening your eyes to some of the who you are questions, like really who you are, not just who you think you are today, but some of the things that formed you. And so there you have some of your self-reflection. This is an activity that you would do all by yourself, all of the things that I've talked about up until this point. Yes? Now, I want you to introduce other people into the exercise. And I don't want you to do this until you're ready to do this. Asking others for feedback. And the reason why I'm hesitating with that is because if you're not ready to receive constructive criticism, don't do it yet. So I want to talk about that for just a second. Some people are very comfortable coming up to their boss and saying, hey, Miss Boss or Mr. Boss, hey, is there anything that I can do better? How am I doing? Is there anything that I can improve on to make your life easier, to do better at my job so that I could, perform better? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Okay, there are people that do this on a regular basis. They seek feedback from their boss. It doesn't mean that they're open to asking their partner the same question. It doesn't mean that they're open to asking their friends the same question. And then there are some people that aren't comfortable at all asking other people for their thoughts, because if they give you negative feedback, you take it very personally. So as part of the exercise in self-awareness, you have to try to see things from an objective viewpoint, from a position of non-judgment. Non-judgment to the person that's giving you the information and non-judgment of yourself. So if it is constructive criticism, because to me there's no such thing as just bad things to say unless they're just insulting you, and that's an entirely different thing. But receive the information with an open mind and ask yourself if there's a possibility that what they're telling you, if there's truth to it, how can you do better? Because the reason why this is a really important exercise in self-awareness, it isn't enough to just know who you are. Sometimes those blind spots that other people see that you don't are the areas where you can improve. They can open your eyes to the possibility that perhaps you could do something a little differently moving forward to make you a better friend, or to make you a better employee, or make you a better partner. And that's so important. Have you ever asked your partner how you're doing? Like, hey, honey, I've been, giving it a little thought, and I've been doing a little introspective work, and I was wondering if you could give me some feedback. How am I doing as a partner? Is there anything that I could do better to improve our relationship or to make you happy? Is there anything that perhaps I do that pesters you, that bothers you, that I could maybe change? Okay. And this isn't about changing who you are. It's about changing in a self-improvement way. It is improving and building upon who you are to become a better version of yourself. Don't be afraid of that. When people say people don't change, like, I get that there are some things that maybe never change. But usually if you're unwilling to change, that's a choice. That's a willingness to not, to change or not change. And if you're watching this video or listening to this podcast, you want to change. You want to know a little bit more about yourself. So welcome to the club of changing for the better and improving who you are. One of the key points that you can learn to do is ask for feedback in a very kind, non-judgmental way. Just be open, receive the information. Not every person is going to tell you things in a thoughtful way. Okay, so if you have that brutally honest friend and you're just like, hey, brutally honest friend, I was wondering if you can give me some feedback on me. Is there anything about me that bothers you? And you have that brutally honest friend that just has a horrible way of communicating to you because they don't know how. And they go, yeah, actually, now that you're asking, you know that I hate when you do this. So you have to sort of know your audience, take the lesson, separate the lesson from the brutal part, and just, what can they teach you? What is it that they're saying? Is there something that you also recognize in what they're saying to go, yeah, I can be a little short-tempered. You're right. I do sort of sometimes fly off the handle when people tell me things a certain way. Maybe that's something that you can work on. So just write down objectively without taking it personally, without being sensitive. Don't take it personally and write down what that feedback is. Because then now that you know what your blind spot is, maybe it's something you didn't think of if you never thought about it before, but people are seeing it and you don't want to be seen that way, then you can change some of the behavior. You can change your approach a little bit so that it isn't so cold or isn't so scary to other people or uncomfortable for other people. So that's part of just kind of improving ourselves. So next, okay, so we've talked about writing down the perceptions that you have of yourself. We've talked about writing down any of your accomplishments, the things that you are proud of, writing down what made you happy as a child, maybe even what makes you happy now as an adult, what brings you true joy, writing down a timeline of your life to understand how far you've come, what is your story, where did you come from? And now we've just asked people for feedback. These are big, by the way. Man, these are super powerful, huh? Ask others for feedback. And the next thing, and this is definitely an essential piece of becoming self-aware, is being in tune with your feelings and emotions. So yes, I'm going to go into emotions. Emotions are important. Okay. Emotions are what drive you to find a partner. Emotions are what drive you to have your offspring and protect them. Emotions are what keep you safe from harm. Emotions every single day play some part or another in every decision that you make. So don't let anyone tell you, or don't even let your history or society tell you that emotions are not important. They are. What is most valuable in understanding emotions is the fact that emotions trigger reactions. And that's the part we're about to tackle. So tune in to how you feel. Identify it in your head. Go, I am starting to get angry. I can feel myself getting annoyed. I can feel myself getting angry. I can feel myself being happy. I can feel that I'm sad. I feel, rejected. I feel, so put a label to it. Okay. Be in tune with how you feel. And the reason why that's important is because until you're aware of how you feel, you can't fix anything. You can't make it better. You can't address the issue with objectivity or consideration in the big picture if you are dismissing your feelings or reacting immediately to your feelings without thinking about it, because you didn't want to give yourself a chance to assess what's going on. So Be in tune. What are you feeling? What was the trigger? Is there more than one feeling involved? Typically, anger, by the way, anger is a secondary emotion in that it's not actually the primary thing you were feeling. You can get to anger from other feelings, but it is not the very first emotion that you felt. Think about the emotion that you felt before you felt anger. If someone insulted you, did it hurt your pride? That's actually closer to sadness, not anger. You react with anger, right? You become angry because if the feeling of hurt or sadness, right? Sadness is too strong or fear is too strong, we immediately go to anger. It's the secondary emotion. So just give that a little bit of thought. Anger comes from somewhere else. And if you're ever feeling angry, get to the bottom of why that is. Are you feeling fear for your life and you're getting angry to defend yourself? Or are you feeling pain, that somebody just hurt your feelings or somebody has torn apart your perception or of how you should have been treated and you decided to be angry and defend yourself somehow, to protect yourself from the pain, to protect yourself from the fear. Okay? I don't want to go too deep into that one either, but I just want to throw that in there. If anger is what you're feeling, explore. Okay? Explore what really got down to that. If you're in tune with your feelings and you've identified your emotions, you can say, when this event happened, this is the feeling that came out of it. And now you can understand, okay, now what do I do? What is the best way to approach this? And you can kind of come back from that emotion with a clear mind. That's more, you're regulating the emotion. And so the next one to tackle is to be mindful. Okay, at this point in time, you've started to get to know yourself. You know what your strengths and weaknesses are. You've started to identify some of your blind spots. You know what makes you tick. You know the triggers. You know the things that make you happy. So all of these, you've started to really, really get to know yourself. You even have a timeline of your life that you've referred back to that may have played a part in the person that you have become today, which is, to me, everything that happens in your lifetime only contributes to the wonderful, amazing person that you are today. But, and so you now have this timeline of your life. You have so much information. Now, what do you do with it? Now we start to put into play your current situations. In other words, what is happening in the present moment? When you start to feel an emotion come on, you're having an interaction with another person. There are a couple of things that you can do also in an exercise of self-awareness, practicing self-awareness. When you have a conversation with somebody, the best thing for you to do is know where you're coming from. Do a self-check, okay? The very first thing. Go, okay, how am I feeling? Is this an environment that is conducive to having a good dialogue with this person or not? If you're not in the right mind space to have the kind of conversation that you're about to have or that you're currently having, you may want to consider asking for is it better that we speak another time? Whether that's the kids screaming in the background and somebody's trying to have a very important conversation with you, or whether you're just in a very different mind space because something happened at work and your friend is trying to tell you about her boyfriend. Maybe you can just say, listen, I do want to hear your story, but I'm not in the right mind space right now. Can I call you a little bit later? You can do that if you're aware of how you are feeling and whether or not the environment and the emotions that you're currently having are conducive to an effective conversation. So first, you have to be able to be present. If you can't be present for some reason, consider postponing the conversation if it can be postponed. Otherwise, proceed in the conversation. So one of the things that you can do in practicing self-awareness, in addition to being aware of your current state of mind, staying present and non-judgmental, is practicing active listening skills. So when you are actively listening to somebody, you aren't just hearing the words that are coming out of their mouth and digesting some of what they're saying and formulating your own opinions, because that's kind of what happens to a lot of people. When someone is speaking to you and your mind starts to go at a mile a minute because all you're thinking about is your own thoughts, your own worries, your own whatever, your own opinions, your own input into the conversation, you're not actually listening to the other person. You can't do them both at the same time. I know some people think that they can, but they can't. So when somebody is talking to you, try to practice, just remind yourself, be present, be in the moment. You have to decide to do that while you're having this conversation. Listen to what it is that they're trying to say. Watch their body language. Try to come at it from their point of view. Think of it, what they are saying from their own personal point of view, not from your point of view. That can wait. So when the thoughts and the feelings and alternate ideas come to your brain, put them on hold. Okay? It's not, exit them from your system. Just kind of go, hold off, put them aside, and just say, not right now. I'll come back to that thought. Listen to what they're trying to tell you, this other person that is engaged in this conversation. Absorb what they're trying to tell you. Try to look at it from their perspective so that you can then respond with an intelligent, well-articulated, honest, candid, helpful response. What frequently happens in people that don't practice active listening is that they're just thinking about what they're going to say next while the person's still talking. They're not absorbing what it is that the person is trying to communicate to you. And so what they do is they're alone in their thoughts and they're not present. They're thinking about what I'm going to say, how I'm going to say it, da 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 da. This is the problem. I have a lot of opinions. They're wrong. And you go through this whole process in your head while the person is trying to get their point across for you to understand, and you end up ignoring and missing the entire point that they were trying to tell. You don't have to agree with them. That's not the point of the exercise. It's just be an active listener. Be present. Don't dive into a world where you're the only opinion that matters, because oftentimes our opinions are wrong, especially if we haven't taken the time to actually effectively listen to another person. The times that I've caught myself, and this is by no means an exact science, and sometimes it's harder than others, especially if you're arguing about something like politics or religion, right? You have your own viewpoints and you're just like, that person is wrong. And you want to just make them stop talking because whatever they say is not going to make sense, right? You're not going to agree with it. My suggestion is, rather than having that kind of mindset where I'm wrong, I'm right and they're wrong, consider just simply understanding how they can possibly think what they are thinking. Take into consideration what their backgrounds might be. Take into consideration where, what their current circumstances are. Oftentimes you'll find that the reason why they are the way they are and they believe the things that they believe is because they had a different life from you. They didn't have the same parents. They didn't have the same upbringing. They didn't have the same education. They didn't have the same experiences. They don't feel the same way that you do. And that is okay. You don't have to agree with someone to be an effective listener and to have better communication skills. If you listen to them, try to understand it from their perspective, you can then respond with compassion instead of insulting or condescension, right? You don't want to be condescending to somebody that is on the other side of the conversation. You want them to say, you want to be able to say, okay, I understand where you're coming from. I still disagree. So if you would allow me to explain, and you can explain it, then your thoughts are welcome. The way that you address it will be a lot easier for and if you let them talk, they'll be more inclined to let you talk. But if you're constantly cutting them off because you have so many opinions and you need to get that opinion out there, it makes for a lot of defensiveness, and it allows the other people to just, they will start to feel like you were dismissing them. they'll feel like what they are saying doesn't matter. And that puts them in a position of defensiveness. They're not going to be communicating properly either. But if you give them an opportunity, try even repeating what they said. Hey, if I understand you correctly, this is what you said. That's another tip in effective listening. Repeat it back to them so that when you say the words back to them, they can go, oh, you were listening. It makes them feel understood. It makes them feel heard. It's an easy exercise in practicing active listening to just repeat back what they say. It does two things. It makes them feel, oh, they listened. And for you, it keeps you focused. If you're so drowning in your own thoughts and your own idea, and you're like, I know I have to say this, I have to say this, I have to say this the entire time, you're not listening. But if you are concentrating on, let me repeat back what they just said, because you'll have a better understanding of what it is that they're trying to tell you as well. You may find that when you repeat it back, they're like, that's not what I said. And then you can say, okay, fair enough. What is it that you said? So at least it's an engagement. You're asking, and hopefully you start to ask open-ended questions. That's another tip in active listening. Don't just say, did you say this? Say, hey, I understood this to mean XYZ. Can you explain that further? Because I'm getting a little, I'm feeling a little defensive. I'm feeling a little insulted by what you just said. Can you please explain that a little bit more? Let them explain it, because oftentimes what we hear is not what they actually meant to say. And for people who are very literal, like my 12-year-old is extremely literal. It's like verbatim. Everything needs to be exact. For people who are very literal, this is a really tough thing to swallow. That, no, I heard these words, that's exactly what you said, and you have formulated an opinion on what their intention was based on those words, and they may not be the best communicator. So maybe their words weren't actually what they meant to say. Give them an opportunity. Just say that I'm getting a little, I feel a little insulted by what you said. Can you please clarify? Because if I understood you correctly, this is what I understood you to say. You may find that they go, oh, no, that's not what I meant to say. Now, if they agree, then you can have a dialogue from there and say, all right, I definitely don't agree. That's a very insulting comment. Let me explain why I don't agree with you. And you can still have an intelligent conversation that is, and yes, emotions are there. Okay, you're still pissed off. You are still, you're hurt. You're afraid. You're a million different things. But you are starting to communicate in a way that is effective. You're getting them to understand that they've been heard. You heard them loud and clear. You understood them because you've even repeated it back and you said, did I understand that correctly? And they can say, yeah, that's exactly what I meant, or no, let me explain it further. And now when you give your thoughts or opinions, you can do it in a respectful, kind, and thoughtful way, even if you don't agree with the person. So I hope all of that makes sense. It's effective listening. I know that for me, practicing that self-awareness piece, there's no way to be 100% self-aware. It's not possible to be 100% objective about yourself. You also are not a mind reader. You oftentimes will not know what other people see when you speak and when you communicate, which is why the feedback of others is a continual thing. Just because you've identified that this is who you are right now doesn't mean that that's the same you that will be in the future. You may change some behaviors. You may regress a little bit in some ways. You may progress in others. So just be aware that as time goes on, if somebody provides additional feedback and says, hey, I think there's this one thing that you haven't noticed, listen. Ask questions. What makes you say that? Where can you give me an example? And learn from it. It's constructive criticism. It's free advice. And you can agree with it or not. But at least someone has tried to point out to you there is something that bothered them about your behavior. Or maybe it's something that they loved about your behavior. Man, did you ever notice how you do this and this and this? That's why I like talking to you. I've had that too. And so there are a lot of things that you can learn about yourself if you just open your mind to the possibility that perhaps you're not the only one who knows you. Your family members, your friends, your colleagues, your partners, they see different versions of you. Just because your partner sees one side of you doesn't mean that that's the only side that exists. There's the boss side of you if you're managing people. There's the mother side if you're a parent. So there are different roles that you play in your life, and in each of those roles, you may have strengths and weaknesses and areas of improvement. So try to explore those as well. Don't look at it as a single dimensional aspect of yourself. You are not just one role. You are multiple roles. And for me, I don't know how many I have. Employee, boss, mom, friend, daughter, I have a multitude of roles, and these people see different sides of me. So I would like to know all facets of ECs, and so should you. So you can write those things down as well. But yeah, so just a recap, we have my little notes here. So to recap, I'm strongly encouraging journaling in an act of self-awareness, writing down the perceptions that you have of yourself, the good and the bad, right? Your strengths and weaknesses, your accomplishments. So you want to have a list of the things that you're proud of. You have what are the things that made you happy as a child. Feel free to add the things that bring you joy as an adult as well, because I think that those are still effective in helping you understand what you do today to bring you joy and how frequently you actually take the time to do them, which you should do as an act of self-care. You wrote a timeline of your life. That timeline that's a big one. Ask others for feedback. Be open to that, because it's big, right? Understanding where your blind spots are. You're not going to know everything all by yourself if you stay in your little cave and just digest, your own internal stuff. So be open-minded to receiving constructive criticism. Don't take constructive criticism personally. Take what you can from it. What can you learn from what they said, and toss the rest away. Identify your feelings. Tune into what you're feeling, because from there you can start to identify what your emotional kryptonite is. So you identify your emotional kryptonite. Become mindful of your feelings and the reaction that you are having to those particular feelings, and the reaction that other people are having to your actions. Looking around the room when you're in the middle of a breakdown is important. Understand if, are you making people uncomfortable? Are you making them scared? Are you making them, are you making them happy? So start to look at the reaction that other people have when you are in those particular events, especially when you're triggered. It helps you to find areas of improvement, okay? Or to continue doing what you're doing because you're awesome. Practice that mindfulness, okay? Be present and in the moment. Be a better communicator by listening actively. Acknowledge that the other person's opinions and thoughts do matter. Listen to what they're trying to say, and then you can respond with a complete thought instead of just cutting them off and assuming you know everything else. Put your assumptions aside. Put your thoughts, opinions aside until you're ready to speak. And you do not speak until you have understood all of the content that this person is trying to tell you. And that way you can have a dialogue that's effective. Ask open-minded, open-ended question, not open-minded. Ask open-ended questions. Don't just ask yes or no questions. Ask them to explain. Can you please elaborate? Okay. And finally, when you do speak, make sure that you are respectful. Make sure that you are non-judgmental in your delivery, and that you are honest and candid in your response. Know your audience. Okay. You don't talk to a child with brutal honesty. Don't condescend to your boss. Don't talk down to somebody who's already in an emotionally vulnerable state. If they're upset about something, the last thing you need to do is continue to badger the person. You may need to kind of change your tone, change your approach, change the way that you deliver the message. And if you're not in the state of mind to have that conversation in the first place, postpone it until you are. If you can't focus on that conversation, don't start it if you don't have to. I think this is all very helpful stuff. I've done all of these and they have been very eye-opening and very powerful in getting me to the point to where I can now claim, hey, I'm pretty self-aware. Do I have room to grow? Absolutely. It's one of the places where I'm continually focusing on. I'm not always aware that my tone is so perfect. I actually had a good girlfriend recently tell me that I can be brutally honest. And I was like, I can? And I've always seen myself as a candid person, but if she told me that, and she's one of my dearest friends, I'm listening, okay? And I didn't let it impact, I didn't get sensitive to it. I didn't say, well, that's not true. No, I was like, really? Can you give me an example? So it turned out to be a learning, moment for me. And so I love that stuff. I want to improve. I want to be a better version of myself. And I know that you do too, because you're listening to this crazy podcast. So best of luck to you. I hope that these tips can be effectively moving you forward in the direction that you're looking to go to. This is such a big thing in emotional intelligence, and it's so big in starting your cultivation of self-love. If a lot of people ask, like, I don't know, I don't feel like I can love myself, blah, blah, blah. How do I start? How do I begin? Start by getting to know yourself. Understand who you are. Understand where you come from. Understand all of those things that make you tick and accept them. It is who you are. And there's nothing wrong with being your own version of you. And if there are things that you can fix, one of the biggest things you can do as a sign of love and compassion to yourself is to take the steps to make yourself better. Get out of the idea that you're just stuck at rock bottom. You're not. You just have to choose to come up. Choose to climb one baby step at a time. If some of these exercises get painful, put it down and continue at a time where you feel a little bit stronger. Practice a little bit of mindfulness. Clear your mind a little bit. Get yourself to a place of non-judgment where you're present and in the moment, and try again. Oftentimes, practicing mindfulness just before, even meditating, before you journal is a really good idea, because you will put yourself into a mind space where you're open to receiving growth opportunities. So start today. You're worth it. I believe that anyone can do this. You've just got to be willing to look, be introspective, be curious. Who are you? You are unique and amazing all by yourself. Figure you out. You may find that there are things that you look back and go, wow, if I had known that about myself a little bit sooner, I might have been better able to communicate. So moving forward, you can do that. And that is so powerful. So until next time, have a good one, and I will see you again soon.